Hi, it's Adriana from the Girls Gone Menopause Podcast. Let me take you back to 2019. I was performing the role of Sojourner Truth addressing the Seneca Falls Suffragist Convention. The show was Suffrage, a history in word and song, produced by my church, the First Congregational Church of Long Beach, in celebration of the 100-year anniversary of the passing of the 19th Amendment granting women the franchise.
Conventions follow. In 1851, a former slave named Sojourner Truth addresses a convention in Akron, Ohio.
Well, children, where there is so much racket, there must be something out of kilter. I think twixt the Negroes of the South and the women at the North all talking about rights, white men will be in a fix pretty soon. But what's all this here talking about? Now that man over there says that women need to be helped into carriages and lifted over ditches and have the best place everywhere. Nobody ever helped me into a carriage or over mud puddles or gives me any best place. And ain't I a woman? Look at me. Look at my arm. I have plowed and planted and gathered into barns and no man could head me. Ain't I a woman? I could work and eat as much as any man when I could get it and bear the lash as well. Ain't I a woman? I have borne 13 children and seen most all of them sold off into slavery. And when I cried out in my mother's grief, none but Jesus heard me. And ain't I a woman? Then they talk about this thing here in the head. What's it they call it? Intellect. That's it, honey. What's that got to do with the women's rights or Negro rights? If my cup won't hold but a pint, and yours holds a quart, wouldn't you be mean not to let me have my little measure full? Then that little man in black over there, he says, women can't have much rights as men because Christ wasn't a woman. Where did Christ come from? Where did your Christ come from? From God and a woman? That ain't had nothing to do with it. If the first woman God ever created could turn the world upside down all by herself, then all of these women together ought to be able to turn it back and get it right side up again. And now they're asking to do it, and these men had better let them. Obliged to you for hearing me, and now that's all old Sojourner ain't got nothing more to say.
It just so happened that First Congregational Church, the oldest church in Long Beach, founded by two of the very people who founded the city of Long Beach, California, Margaret and Jotham Bixby, had not that long before celebrated its own 100-year anniversary. The show is very good, if I do say so myself. You can catch it on the YouTube channel of First Congregational Church of Long Beach. The cast of the performance, the majority of which were co-congregant women, did a few more command performances after the premiere. The Long Beach chapter of the League of Women Voters had a contingent of the suffrage cast come to their meeting and do an abridged performance when the House of Representative Rep. Alan Lowenthal was a special guest. Those of you who are familiar with Southern California and know the social justice networks in the region may know the name Ann Burdett, a fiery and dynamic woman. As a lay leader at St. Luke's Episcopal Church, Ann dedicated decades to standing with vulnerable neighbors. She was instrumental in the Sanctuary Movement and the Rapid Response Network, helping establish the Long Beach Justice Fund to ensure legal and financial support for residents facing deportation. She passed away just last year. She was a cast member, and I so enjoyed performing with her, I just wanted to give her a special shout out. Another cast member was Jane Hansen. Jane is currently a co-president of the Long Beach chapter of the American Association of University Women. The AAUW is continuing the suffrage programming this February. On the 27th of February, the AAUW is inviting the public on a paid suffragist bus tour of Long Beach, California. It will be a narrated bus tour of Long Beach showing where early suffragists lived and strategized. The tickets cost $25 per person. The tour starts at 10 a.m. sharp and ends at 2 p.m. The bus pickup location is the Target parking lot located at Bellflower Boulevard and Stern. There will be a buy-your-own-lunch stop at 2nd and PCH Shopping Center midway through the tour. The deadline to purchase your tickets is February 15th, and you can find information on how to purchase tickets by emailing aauwlongbeach@gmail.com. That's aauwlongbeach@gmail.com. I really want to encourage Girls Gone Menopause women to take this tour and bring their tween granddaughters and or their high school or young adult daughters with them. It's a Friday, which is a school and work day, I know, but it would be worth it to investigate if your child or granddaughter could get some kind of credit in history class for going on this tour. Girls and young women today do not have a sense of how hard fought the rights and privileges they have now were to win, even if they are aware that women's rights in this country are being eroded. It's called the accepted and unnoticed effect. A study by the National Women's History Alliance noted that dramatic social and legal changes, like the right to have a bank account or own property, are now so deeply accepted that they go unnoticed by the people whose lives they have utterly changed, leading to a blithe acceptance of rights that took 7 generations to win. This ignorance partially stems from a lack of education. And I don't mean a bad education. Even the quote-unquote good schools are leaving this out in an effort to cram in all the curriculum needed for students to pass the Advanced Placement History exam. In the study, Rewriting Her Story, Proposing an AP U.S. Women's History course, it was revealed that many young women feel women's history is often glossed over in high school to focus on testing standards. Research indicates that students often don't grasp the complexities or the personal sacrifices of the movement until reaching specialized college-level courses. The study highlights that because women aren't foundational to the AP curriculum, many students enter college assuming women's rights are already explicitly protected by the Constitution, which they are not, or that the Equal Rights Amendment was ratified decades ago, which it was not. Most concerning is a March 2025 report that found 47% of Gen Z women believe women already have equal opportunities in the U.S. This misconception that gender equality has already been achieved can lead to a lack of urgency regarding the fight for equality. Getting your daughter or granddaughter on the bus tour can make the issue of women's rights and how hard fought they were more salient to her by focusing on the parts of the movement and activism that took place right around where she actually lives. And if right around where she actually lives doesn't happen to be Long Beach, that is okay. Look up the American Association of University Women in your town or the League of Women Voters in your town and find out when they are putting on a suffragist history bus tour in your town and get yourself and your daughter on that bus. Listen, I don't want to make it sound like our girls and young women are wallowing in disinterest. The Dobbs effect is real. A November 2025 poll found that abortion and women's rights are now the top motivating issues for young women ages 18 to 29, surpassing economic concerns in many battleground regions. Approximately 72% of young women now say the Equal Rights Amendment is personally important to them, specifically because they see states actively banning reproductive health care. And even despite the knowledge gap, 53% of Gen Z women define themselves as feminists, a significantly higher percentage than baby boomer women, which is 39%. This suggests they are adopting the label of the fight, even if they are still learning the history. Learning that history is important because it can give young women and girls a framework for the techniques of how to organize and strategize and push for specific policies that help women and girls. Now, as the stats I just quoted indicate, young women are mostly focused on abortion access when it comes to the top of mind women's rights issues, and that makes sense. Reproductive autonomy is going to be important to any woman of childbearing age, whether or not she's even sexually active. Anyone can be a victim of sexual assault. But I don't really think these women and girls grasp the depth and breadth of the attack the right is waging on their rights. When they go on this tour and understand how few rights women had back in the day, maybe they'll pay more attention to the rights the right wing is strategically trying to remove from them today. And that's what I want to focus on in this episode, which I hope you Girls Gone Menopause podcast women listen to in order to educate yourselves, but also share with younger women in your life, because these younger women and girls have got to understand what exactly we are up against. The right has been attacking women's rights and promoting a regressive idea of women's place in society for decades. The thing is, now the right has hold of the three branches of government. So I plan to use this episode to point out with receipts just how determined the right is to roll back women's roles in society to a pre-1950s level, and how overt and plain the right is being about this plan. In the video description, there's a link to my Substack post that goes with this episode. In the Substack post are links to the documentation for all the studies and articles I'm going to mention in this episode. Please check out the links in the documents for yourself. For these young women and girls to fully understand how their rights are being attacked and why, they need to have a framework for who exactly is doing the attacking. So let me take you back to Trump as a candidate for POTUS during the 2024 election. When Donald Trump ran for POTUS the second time, his campaign got a lot of criticism for something called Project 2025. Project 2025 was a plan put out by the ultra-conservative Heritage Foundation and its allied conservative network of white nationalists and Christian nationalists of what the conservative vision of the United States would be should the right get back in power by Donald Trump winning the election. Project 2025 was a widely circulated 920-page document with explicit policies in it. Trump's critics were having a field day during the 2024 campaign, highlighting the policies within Project 2025 because the policies were ones critics knew would be unpopular with the majority of the U.S. public. Breaking up trade deals and bringing back high tariffs on foreign goods were one of those policies, for example. Economists warned that if Project 2025 tariff plan was followed, prices for the average consumer would go up, and here we are. In response to these criticisms, Trump said out of his own mouth that he had nothing to do with the Project 2025 plan. On July 5th, 2024, Trump posted on Truth Social that he had nothing to do with Project 2025 and knew nothing about it.
2024 focus right now on President Biden and the future of his campaign. Donald Trump chose today to try to distance himself from Project 2025. That's the 900-plus page document from conservative advisors at the Heritage Foundation, which lays out some pretty aspirational goals to reshape the federal government and, frankly, American life if Trump were to win in November. Well, on Truth Social today, Trump wrote, "I know nothing about Project 2025. I have no idea who's behind it. I disagree with some of the things they're saying, and some of the things they're saying are absolutely ridiculous and abysmal. Anything they do, I wish them luck, but I have nothing to do with them." Several Trump allies, though, do have ties to Project 2025.
And here Trump is saying during the 2024 debate with Kamala Harris that he has nothing to do with the Project 2025 plan.
I have nothing to do, as you know, and as she knows better than anyone, I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad, but it makes no difference. I have nothing to do. Everybody knows I'm an open book. Everybody knows what I'm going to do. Cut taxes very substantially and create a great economy.
So Trump gets elected, and what does he do? He immediately appoints people directly associated with Project 2025 to high-level positions in his administration. Here are just a few. Russ Vought, director of the Office of Management and Budget. Vought is arguably the most significant link. He was a top architect of Project 2025 and the author of the chapter on the Executive Office of the President. As OMB director, he controls the nerve center of the government, overseeing the budget and the implementation of presidential policy. Brendan Carr, chairman of the FCC. Carr is the author of the Project 2025 chapter on the Federal Communications Commission. He was appointed by Trump to lead that very agency. We all know Stephen Miller, deputy chief of staff for policy. Miller's organization, America First Legal, was a primary advisor group for Project 2025. He also appeared in Heritage Foundation videos promoting the project's goals. Tom Homan, border czar, a named contributor to the Project 2025 mandate for leadership. John Ratcliffe, CIA director, a Project 2025 contributor whose chief of staff wrote the project's chapter on the intelligence community. Pam Bondi, attorney general, described by the ACLU and other monitors as an ardent Project 2025 supporter who worked to implement its goals before her nomination. Okay, so these people had all been floating adjacent to government in the right-wing influence circles for some time. So maybe these were people Trump would have picked regardless, but the policies Trump immediately began implementing matched the Project 2025 plan. For a man who said he never read it, he sure seemed to write a lot of executive orders that came right from it. An analysis by The Lever showed that nearly 2/3 of Trump's executive orders in the first 30 days of his second term mirrored policies promoted in Project 2025. I personally think Trump lied about having nothing to do with Project 2025. Not much of a surprise. What may be a surprise to young women and girls is just how deeply regressive the views on women's role in society are over at the Heritage Foundation. Again, those are the people who are the sponsors of Project 2025, and over at those right-wing network organizations associated with the Heritage Foundation. What might also surprise them is how blatantly these people spell out those regressive views and how much they have already implemented policies that support those regressive views. For a look at some of those regressive views, let's start with, wait for it, the idea of rescinding the 19th Amendment and taking the voting franchise away from women in the United States. This is not a joke. For any youngins whose grandma shared this podcast with them, franchise is not just a burger joint or a chicken place. Franchise is the right to vote. John McEntee is a prominent figure in the Trump orbit, having served as former director of the White House Presidential Personnel Office during Donald Trump's first term, and later as senior advisor for Project 2025. In a 2023 video, McEntee said this.
Understood. When we said we wanted male-only voting, we meant male M-A-L-E.
And McEntee ended the quote by saying that the 19th Amendment might have to go. When the quote resurfaced during the 2024 campaign, McEntee claimed it was just a joke. It doesn't seem so funny because it fits a pattern of right-wing Project 2025 related men in Trump's orbit stating out loud that women should be disenfranchised. In August 2025, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reposted a video featuring Doug Wilson, a pastor who argued that the 19th Amendment was a bad idea. The original segment by CNN featured Wilson and other pastors in his denomination advocating for household voting. That is when the male of the household, the father/husband, votes on behalf of everybody in the household, the wife and the kids, and a repeal of the 19th Amendment. Hegseth accompanied the repost with the phrase, "All of Christ for all of life," a tagline associated with Doug Wilson's church. And can we talk about Doug Wilson for a second? Wilson is the unofficial patriarch of a network that includes Russ Vought and House Speaker Mike Johnson. Their goal is to subject the U.S. to biblical law, and like I said, they are not shy about saying the quiet part out loud. Wilson spent nearly 5 decades building the institutions, classical Christian schools, Christian publishing houses, and Christian colleges that now crawl through the current administration. Wilson provided the ideological foundation for many of the project's most controversial proposals. Outside analysts and investigative reports from NPR and The Guardian describe Project 2025 as a great example of a Christian nationalist blueprint for America, a movement that Doug Wilson has spent 50 years building and mainstreaming. Wilson believes in a society where men are dominant and women's roles are centered around the home and family, arguing that current societal trends, including women's pursuit of higher-level education and careers, are a result of men failing to take responsibility. Because this Christian nationalist view of a woman's place in society is aligned with the ultra-conservative views of the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 openly promotes making it harder for women to obtain advanced degrees or go to college at all in the name of incentivizing women to get married younger and have more children. If someone wants to stay home, get married, and have 5 million babies and make the home and taking care of her husband or her kids the central part of why she exists, that is her business. Trad wives, goddess bless you, go, 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 go. But if someone is staying home and doing all that because they don't have other options, that's my business. That's society's business. So I don't want to get it twisted. I am not against all that traditional, very conservative stuff if that's the way those women want to live. What I'm saying is that it is critical that we pay attention to and fight back against people who would make it so that every woman has to live that way, regardless of the choices she would make if she had all her own agency. Project 2025 frames its education goals, really anti-education goals, as fiscal and anti-woke reforms. Yet the authors of Project 2025 explicitly tie women's acquisition of higher education to women having fewer children in the United States. Lower birth rates are a trend the Project 2025 authors specifically state that they wish to reverse. Project 2025 explicitly states that the federal government should promote a biblically based, social science reinforced definition of marriage and family, consisting of a married father and mother. As recently as September 2025, the Heritage Foundation put out a paper reiterating the purpose of these regressive education policies. The paper was titled, Saving America by Saving the Family, a Foundation for the Next 250 Years. It explicitly argues that current education and career paths for women are fertility depressing. So here's the thing. Every Western nation, every developed nation is going through a fertility slump right now, and many governments, plus China, plus Russia, which are not, considered Western, are trying a bunch of things to get women to have more babies. And there's plenty of articles about how none of that is working. But the United States is the only nation that's saying in government, people high up in government saying, oh, what would get women to have more babies? If we cut off their other avenues of opportunity, like education. It's ridiculous, but it's not funny. We really need to pay attention. Lindsay Burke is the director of the Center for Education Policy at the Heritage Foundation and the lead author of the education chapter in Project 2025. In November 2024, Burke co-authored a Heritage Foundation report titled, Education Policy Reforms Are Key Strategies for Increasing the Married Birth Rate. In this and related heritage publications, the argument is made explicitly. The report argues that the current American education system, specifically higher education, is a fertility-depressing institution. It states that because women are encouraged to pursue long-term degrees and careers, they delay marriage and childbearing, leading to fewer children overall. The solution that Burke and her co-author, Jay Green, suggest is reducing the federal subsidies for higher education, like the student loan programs Project 2025 proposes to eliminate. In this way, says Burke, the government can disincentivize the prolonged period of education that keeps women out of the married fertility window. You know what else keeping women from higher education keeps them out of? Upward mobility. This is especially true for non-white women, who, in order to even get the amount of money in salary that high school white women get, have to have a college degree. So make no mistake about it, the other side of keeping women inside the married fertility window is keeping women financially dependent on men. Okay, so here are Burke's specific policy suggestions, and here is how the Trump administration responded to those suggestions. Burke's paper called for eliminating student loans altogether. It calls for the complete elimination of the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program and the Income-Driven Repayment Program. Those are called PSLF and IDR specifically. So if you have a child in college or you are in college and you took out loan or had to fill out loan documents, PSLF and IDR is what you would see on there. The Trump administration took these Heritage Foundation Christian nationalist policy positions and straight up applied them to legislative policy in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act passed in 2025. Listen to some aspects of the OBBBA and how closely they adhere to the anti-women education policy positions of Project 2025. The OBBBA instructs the Department of Education to eliminate SAVE, PAY, and ICR, Income Contingent Repayment Plans, by July 1st, 2028, just like Burke advised. The Repayment Assistance Plan, RAP, is reformed, quote unquote. Starting July 1st, 2026, the only income-driven option for new borrowers will be the RAP. Unlike current plans, even the poorest borrowers must pay a minimum of $10 a month, and forgiveness only happens after 30 years, up from 20 to 25 years. So save and pay are gone. Those are the federal buckets of money that get distributed to the states for loans. And ICR, income contingent repayment, is also gone. The OBA actually weaponizes the PSLF. Again, that is the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program. While the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program still exists on paper, the administration has issued a new rule effective July 1st, 2026 that allows the Department of Education to disqualify nonprofit employers from the program if they engage in activities the administration deems illegal, specifically citing organizations that advocate for immigrants or gender-affirming care. Two other policy areas on which Project 2025 sets its Christian nationalist sights. Okay, so let's be really clear about what that means. You go to nursing school and you took out a loan, and then you decided that here in Long Beach, you wanted to work at the center, which is the LBGTQ Center on 4th, and they've got a clinic inside there. And you say, I want to give back to the community, I want to work there. They are a nonprofit. And then you apply for loan forgiveness because you say, hey, I'm not getting actually paid enough money. I'm doing this out of love for my community more than to make, a bunch of money. So I want loan forgiveness. So the government can say, well, you work at a nonprofit that supports gender affirming care. So no, you don't qualify. It doesn't make any difference if economically or according to your salary you qualify. That employer that you work for doesn't count. But they could twist that to be a lot of things. You could be working at a daycare, and if they decide that the daycare allows Chris to walk around at 4 years old and everybody call him Christina and they're okay with that, that could be gender affirming care. And then they could say, well, you got an education degree and you want loan forgiveness, but you work at that Head Start or you work at that daycare and they do gender affirming care, so you don't qualify for loan forgiveness. Don't get it twisted. That's the way they're going to apply this. I guarantee you. Lindsay Burke also proposed that all student lending be returned to private banks because that was just so successful when we did it the first time, which would significantly increase interest rates and make college inaccessible for millions. The OBBBA is already being used to starve federal loan systems, forcing students into the private market. The Grad Plus loan program is being eliminated for new borrowers starting July 1st, 2026. If you are not rich, but you want to attend grad school to earn an advanced degree in botany to run a high-value cannabis farm, or you want to get an MBA so you'd be better equipped to start and run a business, welp, you might as well put that education on credit cards because you don't have anywhere to go but the private market for student loans. The law sets much lower lifetime borrowing limits, $31,000 for dependent undergraduates and a total aggregate limit of $100,000 for graduate students, including their undergraduate debt. All this as college tuition is increasing. The one exception is if you're getting an advanced degree in one of the professions. Then the limit is borrowing up to $200,000. But let's talk about that. Now, you may be saying, okay, Adriana, it is not good that students won't be able to have access to grad school because the loans won't be available as they once were. But that is going to affect all students. Why are you making it about women? You'd be right to say that, but the damage goes further. The Trump administration declassified certain graduate degrees so that they are no longer considered professional degrees. What this means is that these advanced degrees are not eligible for the higher borrowing limit, that $200,000. And guess what? The majority of those declassified degrees are in fields dominated by women. Going to medical school to be a doctor, your borrowing limit is still $200,000. Getting a master's degree or even a PhD in nursing, declassified, The nursing profession is 85% female. Getting an advanced degree in education, declassified. Those getting advanced degrees in education are 77% female. Getting a master's or doctorate in occupational therapy in order to help our increasingly aged U.S. population, declassified. Occupational therapist field is 77% female. Getting a master's degree or PhD in public health, declassified. Of all the students pursuing a master's degree or advanced degree in public health, 70% are female. The nursing declassification is really where it is clear that this policy is about creating barriers to women's higher education and not about saving money for the taxpayer in the overall. The United States has a shortage of nurses. That is why the U.S. imports so many nurses from the Philippines, and there are plenty of articles about that. It's very interesting. It goes back to colonial times. So the Trump administration, through its anti-immigrant policies, is actually cutting off legal pathways for Filipinos to come be nurses in the U.S., at the same time that it's making nursing schools less financially attainable to people who are citizens. This is going to end up costing anyone who needs health care more money as time goes on. As the number of nurses goes down, because U.S. citizens are finding it harder to afford nursing school, the amount of money that individual nurses can command for their work goes up. That's the law of supply and demand in labor. And as the U.S. population is aging, even more nurses will be needed. But the right wing is so bent on putting women back in the kitchen that they're not even considering the long-term implications of what they are doing. Okay, so you know that ICE and Border Patrol are sowing chaos and terror right now in Minnesota. And you know that Trump sent Greg Bovino and his goons to Minnesota because Trump had a vendetta against Governor Walz in particular for daring to run against him in the presidential election, and a vendetta against big blue cities in swing states that Trump thinks kept him from winning those states in the 2024 election. That's what you know. But why does Trump say out of his mouth that he is sending ICE and Border Patrol to Minneapolis, Minnesota? Trump has said repeatedly that Minnesota is rampant with financial fraud being wreaked by criminal networks of Somali immigrants. The particular financial fraud in which they are engaged, according to him, has to do with illegally collecting funds the state of Minnesota disperses on behalf of the federal government to run daycare centers and Head Start type programs. And you know what? There was fraud. There was $300 million worth of fraud, and a number of Somalis were involved. The words to key in on there are was and were. The program that got defrauded was called Feeding Our Future, and here is the timeline of what went down. The story actually starts in 2018 with the state of Minnesota getting sued because it denied the applications of Somali-owned businesses to be part of the Feeding Our Future program. But we're going to pick it up in 2021, and you'll see why. So in April 2021, the Minnesota Department of Education staff officially informed the FBI of their suspicions regarding the diversion of funds from the Feed Our Future program. In March of 2023, federal and state prosecutors announced the first major round of charges against defendants. By late 2025, by the time the current administration of the Trump administration took office, 78 people had already been charged, and dozens had already been convicted or pleaded guilty under the previous state-federal partnership. By July of 2025, Governor Tim Walz had signed new, aggressive anti-fraud laws in Minnesota months before the federal freeze, which included protections for whistleblowers and the power of the state to freeze payments to suspected fraudsters immediately. By the time Trump came back into power, the state of Minnesota and the feds had worked together to root out the fraudsters and lock up over 100 people. The situation was already under control. Trump didn't care. He just lied and used the situation as an excuse to go to Minneapolis and start rounding up Somalis for detention and deportation. It doesn't matter that the majority of Somali immigrants in Minnesota are actually citizens. Almost 58% of the Somalis in Minnesota were born in the U.S., Of the foreign-born Somalis in Minnesota, an overwhelming majority, 87%, are naturalized U.S. citizens. It was convenient for Trump to use the false narrative of some sort of welfare fraud to send ICE and Border Patrol to terrorize Minneapolis. You know what else it was convenient for? Freezing the federal funds that are sent to the states to help subsidize the childcare centers. On December 30th, 2025, the administration froze childcare funds to Minnesota, citing rampant fraud. The acting CDC director, Jim O'Neill, claimed the move was in response to the Feeding Our Future case, which had already been resolved. The people were already locked up or had pled out. But the administration did not stop there. On July 1st, 2026, the administration expanded this freeze to every state in the U.S. And this is how you know it wasn't really about fraud. No other states were involved in the Feeding Our Future fraud scheme. So why freeze daycare funds to all 50 states? To drive women out of the workforce, of course. Reports from 2025 indicate that child care costs had already been rising faster than inflation, causing an increase in women, specifically mothers of young children, dropping out of the labor force. Analysts at the Center for American Progress noted that this freeze targeted programs serving approximately 339,000 children and threatened the economic stability of families nationwide. The fact that when childcare options go down, women are driven out of the labor force is supported by a major October 2025 report from KPMG International and supplemental data from the Century Foundation. Rising costs, increasing faster than inflation, the expiration of COVID-era subsidies, and the new federal funding freezes have created what analysts call a childcare plateau that is actively forcing women, wait for it now, particularly women who have a college degree, to leave their jobs. The reports indicate that this disruption resulted in up to 1.44 billion lost work hours in 2024 and between 15 billion and 44 billion in lost wages for families. This financial disruption is a feature, not a bug, for the Heritage Foundation Christian nationalists like Mike Johnson, Ross Vaught, Pete Hegseth, and many others who have prominent positions in the Trump administration. They want to return to a pre-1950s United States in which the majority of women have very limited financial agency without a man in their lives, be it a husband or a father. They want women out of public life and for the center of women's lives and activities to be wifing and mothering. Let me repeat. If it is your heart's desire, if the Holy Spirit is speaking to you as a woman and saying your greatest fulfillment is going to be in being a wife and mother, Goddess bless you. Go find a good husband. Let him be the sole breadwinner and you run the home and find your bliss. But it is not right and it should be fought against for that to be the only path available to women. Women should have the agency to take that path or not take that path. There should be policies in place to allow women to have 5 kids if they want to. There should be universal pre-K. There should be mandated paid family leave. There should be subsidized childcare. There should be Medicare for all, where the quality of your child's education should not be dependent on your zip code and you being able to buy a house in a rich-ass neighborhood. We should be supporting women who want to have a lot of babies, and we should be allowing women to thrive and have agency who don't want to have any babies at all. Choice, 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 choice. That's what I'm about. Not shoehorning every woman into what your God says is women's role. If you're a Girls Gone Menopause Podcast woman who's older than me, I'm in my 50s, then you have a sense of what times used to be like for women when there were 2 separate columns in the job listing section of the newspapers. Young people, ask mom or grandma what that means. But these young women may not have a sense of it. Going to a suffragist tour and seeing for themselves places they are familiar with where women organized, strategized, and fought for the right to vote might really spark something in your granddaughter or daughter. Hearing from a skilled tour guide exactly how things were for women before the 19th Amendment and getting an understanding of the agency and freedom for which those suffragists were fighting might just galvanize a young woman in your life to do anything and everything she can to make sure women's rights are not just maintained, but expanded towards full equality. Hey, thanks so much for listening. If you liked this podcast episode, be sure to hit like and subscribe, but most of all, share it with a young woman in your life and contact the Long Beach American Association of University Women to see about buying your and her ticket to get on that bus February 27th. Reach out to me in the comments if you plan on attending in Long Beach or in your own city. I want to say hello personally to any listeners who take the tour, and I want to hear from listeners who are planning on taking the tour in their city after they take it, what they thought about it. Until next week, this has been the Girls Gone Menopause Podcast.